Hello and welcome to a video about the fungus among us. Now, a fungus is a member of kingdom fungi, or kingdom fungi, kingdom fungi. I've heard it said many different ways. But anyway, this slide is actually mostly review, and you're held accountable for all this information. So make sure, even though we talked about it last unit, you need to remember it still for this unit. Now, fungi are eukaryotic, which means they have a nucleus, and they are heterotrophs, which means they get energy from other organisms. Now here's the thing. The way they get their energy is they have little thread-like bodies. The thread's called hyphae. We'll get there in a second. But these threads spread over whatever they're trying to get energy from. So let's say it's a log, a fungus that's eating at a rotted log. What happens is it excretes enzymes onto that log that break up the cells, and it's able to soak up the nutrients from that log. So basically what they do is they digest things outside their body, whereas animals, we like to digest things inside our body. So that's what kind of sets fungus apart from the other groups besides, cell walls, things like that, but the way they get their nutrition. They have cell walls with chitin in them. They are non-motile, most of them, which means they don't move, and then most of them are multicellular. There are a few motile fungus, there are a few unicellular fungus, but we're not going to address them too much today. So, first we're going to talk about the structure of fungus. Now what you see here is kind of your run-of-the-mill mushroom. I think everyone here has seen a mushroom in the store, or they've seen one growing next to a tree, anything like that. Now here is sort of something people don't realize about fungus. Most of the body of a fungus is actually below ground. Or below the surface of whatever you're looking at. So like bread, for example, you get mold on the outside, it has a fungus on it. Most of the body of that fungus is actually below the surface of the crust of your bread, or whatever you're looking at. Now fungus is made of something called hyphae. Hyphae are strands. They're one single cell wide. They're kind of long cells, and a lot of those together make up a fungus. So looking at that mushroom picture, you can see a bunch of little stringy cells all packed together. They make up the fungus. Now, below ground, there's a large tangled mass of these hyphae. That is called the mycelium, and that actually makes up most of the body of the fungus. These mycelium can get up to miles large. So you actually have one single organism that is as large as miles across. Okay, so fungus can be very large. This is kind of the disgusting fact, I guess, about fungus is whatever you get at the store. So you think of your mushrooms that you like on your burgers or anything. Those are actually the reproductive structures of the fungus, and we call that in general the fruiting body. It's made up of the stalk going up, which has a lot of hyphae packed into it, or packed together to make up the stalk. At the top you have what's called a cap, and that's what spreads the spores, because below that the spores come out from the cap. And then several fruiting bodies come from one mycelium. So although this might seem like one individual, there can actually be hundreds of mushrooms coming from one single mycelium. Those are all part of the same organism. Okay, so here's an example. Some of you may have seen this. It's called a fairy ring, and you might have thought to yourself when you saw this picture, wow, that's a lot of individual mushrooms. Well, the reality is those are all a part of the same organism. There's a mycelium below the ground, and all those mushrooms are coming from that mycelium. So they're all one organism. If you took DNA from the cells of each single one of those, it'd all be the same. Here's another example. Maybe someone's run into this before. I believe the mold that grows on oranges is actually related to penicillin, or it is penicillin. Hopefully I'm right on that, because this is on the internet. But on the surface you might think, hey, this orange is fine, there's just mold on the outside, I peel off the peel. But actually, if you look within the orange itself closely enough, you'll see hyphae growing through it, because those hyphae are breaking down the cells of the orange and soaking up the nutrients. So if you see a little mold on the outside of an orange or any other sort of citrus, do not eat it, because there is also mold inside of it. You might just not realize it until you open it up. So anyway, we're going to talk about fungus reproduction next. Now, fungus can reproduce both sexually and asexually. In sexual reproduction, they use meiosis to make spores. In asexual reproduction, they use mitosis. And this is kind of a theme for all of life. If an organism reproduces sexually, they usually go through meiosis, they make gametes, those gametes merge together to make the first cell of the next organism. If it's an asexual organism, they simply divide from original cells. They make cells that are identical. Now, a spore is what we call the reproductive unit, so it's like what's produced after shortly after reproduction that can then be activated into a new organism at some point. It's kind of like a seed. Okay, it's the fungus version of a seed. And actually, there's some plants that use spores instead of seeds. So first, asexual reproduction is pretty straightforward. As I said, mitosis occurs. A spore is formed from cells dividing. And then a stalk will usually form at the bottom of a spore. So pretend there's like a stalk here. Here, pretend my pen here is a stalk, and there'll be a spore at the top, and that spore might fall off and go elsewhere, or even this thing at the top of the stalk may open up and have several spores that come out of it. There's a lot of different ways that fungus like to spread their spores, but basically there's a stalk at the top and things are released. Next, sexual reproduction. This is a little complicated. There aren't actually male and female fungus. They all can just make haploid reproductive cells. And what happens is those two cells, which are hyphae, come together. This is from two separate fungus. Now, here's the thing. Like I said, there's no male or female. So the cells are actually not, they don't have a gender. They're like this, there's no man, woman. It's like just, they're the same. So arbitrarily, one's assigned to be the plus and one's assigned to be the minus, or positive, negative. I've even heard them referred to as A and B before. And they merge together, they make one cell with two fused nuclei, and that cell can then grow into a new fungus that is a combination of the DNA from those two previous fungus, because it's sexual reproduction, so you're combining DNA from two different parents. Now we're going to look at the four phyla of fungus. Now remember, you have domain, then you have kingdom, then you have phyla. Phyla is the plural of phylum. So there are four phyla. Phylum Chytridomycota, phylum Zygomycota, phylum Ascomycota, and phylum Basidiomycota. So let's take a look at those real quick. First, you have what are called the chytrids, phylum Chytridomycota. Say that at home. All right. They are aquatic fungi, actually. Fungi. I can't even decide if I want to say fungi or fungi. But anyway, or fungi. But anyway, they have little flagella on them. I think a lot of them are unicellular. Don't quote me on that. But they are decomposers, and they actually decompose things in lakes, and they decompose things in most moist soil. And really, me saying they're decomposers found in lakes, pretty much all fungi are decomposers, which means they break down the bodies of dead organisms. And actually, that helps recycle nutrients throughout the environment. So that's a very good thing. Decomposing is actually a good thing for the environment. Next, we have phylum Zygomycota, also known as the bread molds, because really the most we interact with them. I mean, these grow on other things besides bread, but we often see these growing on bread, so they got the nickname the bread molds. What happens is when a zygote forms, a tough capsule forms around it, and those can be spread, and that capsule can be dormant for long periods of time. So it can lay dormant, I don't know the exact time frame, but let's say for a few months, and then finally be activated on a piece of bread, and then it can grow and ruin your bread. Okay? But anyway, the hyphae, they do once again extend downwards. The previous group, chytrids, didn't really have hyphae that extend through stuff. But anyway, these hyphae, they extend through things, they decompose them, and so on. Now, the next group starts to look a little familiar maybe. Phylum Ascomycota. They are known as the sac fungi, or sac fungi. The way I remember this is if you look at the, I need to set my thing for pen, but I can't do that when I have this thing going. Oh wait, here, draw. Alright, so here we go. That's kind of what the top of a Ascomycota always looks like. The way I remember the name is you see ASC, you could reorganize that into SAC. Okay? Now, the sexual reproductive structure is this sac that's called an ascus. So this is the ascus of what's called a morel here. These are kind of expensive. These are kind of your run-of-the-mill forest fungi you'll run into. Now you'll notice the difference between Ascomycota and the next group is that generally the sacs can curve upwards, or parts of them, like this right here. Okay? Now, this right here is a truffle. I don't exactly know how that looks like an ascus. Um, there's probably some fungus experts that definitely have a reason for that. But those are actually extremely expensive. They use pigs to find those in the forest. It costs a lot of money to cook with truffles. They're quite sought after. Oh, come on, let's flip forward. Oh, I gotta. There we go. All right. So next group then, and our final group, this is actually our last slide, is called phylum Basidiomycota, and these are probably, when you first heard the word fungus, this is probably what you thought of. Your run-of-the-mill mushrooms, like back on draw mode, like these ones here. They form what's called a basidium. Now, a basidium looks like this. It's kind of like the reverse of an ascus. It has a stalk here, and it has what they call a club shape of a reproductive structure that curves kind of downwards. And the way these generally reproduce is they have spores that gather here. Whoop, it's zooming. I don't want that to happen. But anyway, it has things that form like that. Stop. I don't know what's going on. Okay, anyway. So they have spores that form underneath that club, and they can scatter. They form within something called the gills. There we go. Zoom back out. So these Basidiomycota, your portobello mushrooms, your shiitake mushrooms, all those things that we like to eat, they're all part of Basidiomycota. And there's a nice bacon western burger or whatever from Burger King to remind you that the ones we mainly eat Basidiomycota. And that is all I have. Thank you for watching.